We're just leaving Area 15, having visited Universal's Horror Unleashed. We're about to travel into the Las Vegas Strip. Join me, passenger. Las Vegas reinvents itself faster than almost any city on Earth. A city that erases itself. A city designed to move on. Las Vegas doesn't like to look backward. Casinos are demolished while still profitable. Names change. Histories are buried beneath new carpet. History itself is something the Strip actively tries to erase. But some events are too large to erase, and some places don't forget what happened inside them. Tonight isn't about legends. It's about documented catastrophes and what people who work these buildings say happens after the crowds leave. Tonight we're driving the Strip, not chasing legends, but stopping at a few locations tied to documented tragic deaths, where employees continue to report things that don't fit easily into reports or maintenance logs. Boy, don't you just love traffic. These red lights will last quite a while. Luckily, you and I can chat. On November 21st, 1980, a fire broke out at the MGM Grand Hotel. 85 people lost their lives, most from smoke inhalation. This is one of the deadliest hotel fires in U.S. history. Fire reports and later investigations confirmed fire alarms failed on multiple floors. Smoke spread rapidly through the ventilation system, and many victims never actually saw the flames, only smoke. Firefighters later described smoke thick enough to crawl through, guests frantically pounding on doors, and the upper floors filling before any fire alarms were activated. The building was eventually remodeled and reopened as Bally's. If you've seen the film The Incredible Burt Wonderstone, that hotel will be familiar to you. But employees of Bally's say that the fire never really left. Over decades, staff reported phones ringing in sealed rooms, elevator calls to floors closed since the fire, smoke smells with no source, figures seen at the end end of corridors, often described as blurred or gray. Smoky is the word I would use, and all of these are consistent with paranormal reports in locations touched by tragedy. If there's an area where multiple people lost their lives in a sudden fashion, well, that's a recipe for the paranormal, if you ask me. Housekeepers reported cleaning rooms that felt used, despite being vacant. Security logs show repeated false alarms in the same areas. Something was setting them off. But who? Or what? No explanation was ever finalized. The incidents weren't dramatic enough to investigate deeper. They just continued. Paranormal investigators, including Janet Russell and Jeff Beldner, have interviewed former staff who refused to go on record publicly, but described the same floors, the same times, and the same disturbances. You can stay at this hotel, by the way, but you'll have to look for it under another name. On December 15th, 2022, Bally's was rebranded the Horseshoe Las Vegas. But the stories remain the same. According to the website hauntedrooms.com, in the Bally's Hotel, now the Horseshoe, there's also a certain bank of slot machines in the casino which is said to be haunted by an old woman. People who have seen the ghost thought that there was smoke coming from the cigarette she was holding, but upon closer inspection, they saw that her dress was on fire. There are also reports of the voice of a small boy on the 17th floor who is crying out desperately for his mother. The cries then fade into coughing and then silence. Now let's talk about the Flamingo. This was before the Strip existed, before Vegas was Vegas. The Flamingo opened in 1946, predating the Strip as we know it. It was run by Bugsy Siegel, the famous mobster. The hotel's mob history is well recorded. Siegel was murdered in 1947, and some say he never really left. What followed were decades of staff accounts, not guest stories. Housekeeping staff reported cold air localized to specific suites, beds appearing sat in after cleaning, sounds of movement behind locked doors, the sense of someone standing just out of sight. Security officers describe a man in a dated suit near service corridors, where guests are not allowed. Sightings last only seconds. The man disappears when approached. And of course, there is no physical trace left afterward. These stories didn't circulate publicly. They stayed inside the building, passed quietly between night shift workers, Vegas paranormal historian David G. Schwartz has noted that mob-era properties often show the longest continuity of staff reports, not because of belief, but because layouts haven't changed. And for the ghosts, it's just how they remembered it when they were around. Why do Las Vegas Strip hauntings keep happening? Well, most Vegas sightings don't come from guests. That's the interesting thing to note here. Despite Vegas being a hotbed for tourists, most haunting reports come from maintenance crews, housekeeping, security, graveyard shift employees. And all these Vegas Strip hauntings share a pattern. Almost always seen by employees, almost always during graveyard shifts, and almost never involve guests directly, and almost always unforgettable. So why is that? Well, people working these jobs walk the same routes day in and day out. They know the normal sounds of the place, and they notice changes immediately. Employees know when something feels off because it wasn't off yesterday. That's why the stories don't disappear. That's what keeps these stories alive. Not belief, repetition. Vegas never sleeps, and maybe that's the problem. Some things only leave when a place finally rests. If you're driving tonight, past a casino glowing like daylight, remember, not everyone who checked in was able to check out. There's more Vegas coming on the next drive.